Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
and you gotta be confident about your Achilles when you show up.
Yeah, I mean, I got it.
And Adam LaRue. Don't hope to it. Be great and dominate.
All right. Welcome back into Operation Domination. It's playoff time. This is what we've been saddling up for all season long. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mater, joined here with Adam LaRue and Chase Thornton. Make sure you download Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app and check out our video content on the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Net. Ladies and gents, I know if you're still watching this, if you're still listening to the show, congratulations. Unless you're a crazy person, we welcome those too. But unless you're a crazy person, you're probably not listening to too much fantasy football if you're not in the playoffs, which is what this whole show is going to be centered around, by the way. So we're putting a pause on the Dynasty temperature check. Sorry, Adam. We'll get back to it. Don't worry. We have a whole off season for Dynasty, but we want to make sure we get as many of these like start sit type questions that everybody has in their mind because everybody's locked in and needs to make the right decision. So hopefully we can help you out. Of course, we'll still have the DFS Cocktail Hour at the end of the show as Chase breaks into it early, but it's all good. I like that. It's all in the theater. All right, gents. First of all, I want to do this real quick. How are you guys faring in your leagues?
I'm feeling good. My redraft leagues went pretty well for the most part, really well in my home leagues so far. So I'm sitting well there. One of the top scoring teams. I made playoffs, so I'm sitting good there, feeling good about that. And the vast majority of my dynasty teams are in the playoffs and in good competition standing, not like just squeaking into the playoffs. I'm actually ahead of schedule in a couple of them where I was rebuilding. So I actually feel really good about the vast majority of my teams right now. So,
okay. Well, that's good.
I definitely still need to take our advice. So
sure. Adam.
Yeah, I feel pretty good. Probably in an opposite boat of Chase there. I think I've done a little bit better in Dynasty than Redraft, which is why I talk about what I talk about. And also why I let you guys take the lead on some of the Redraft and DFS stuff. But I think on the whole, it should be right around half in the playoffs. And I think another half of that are legitimate contenders. So feel pretty good about that.
All right. Nice. It's always good when the guys hosting the podcast show are doing well for fantasy football.
Yeah,
it bodes well for credibility. There's only one league, one FFPC league that I had that I cared about where I'm not in the playoffs. Every other league that I cared about, I am in the postseason. So I'm feeling pretty good in my own right, which kicks us off to this question. It's kind of why I led up into it, because now you guys are in the postseason. You can answer this from your own perspectives. How aggressive should I be dropping bench depth for 1 week rentals, whether it be for a quarterback, a running back, a defense, a wide receiver, whatever, now that the fantasy playoffs are here in week 15? So how would you guys approach this situation, right? You made the playoffs. It's do or die every single week, but you do know that if you win, there's still an element of the weeks to come, and you want to win a championship ultimately, not just win one game and then get knocked out of the playoffs the next round. So how much that weighs into what's on your depth? How much are you willing to get rid of, even if they are, let's say, maybe some decently valuable pieces? I don't know, Adam, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of nuance there, and I think it just comes down to how valuable those players are, for one. You have to look at the pool of like the other people in the playoffs and how much would they benefit them, right? Like if the person who you would potentially go up against next week is really hurting at running back, maybe you reconsider dropping a running back who's getting points actively, versus, some guys who you can't necessarily predict them getting points or not. Like young guys you've been holding on to, for example, like maybe you feel a little bit better about dropping them. And then there's also a bit of like, candidly, are you the higher seed? Are you kind of expecting to win this matchup? Because in that case, I feel a little bit better about keeping my bench versus like, I need to get every point possible out of this lineup to win this game. I feel a lot better about sacrificing my bench. So there's that aspect to it. But I mean, ultimately, the only way you win the championship is winning this week. So that is the number one priority as far as I'm concerned. Like, there has to be some amount of focus on future weeks. Like, you can't completely ignore that, but like, you don't win the whole thing without winning this week. So you got to do that first.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, Chase, do you have anything to add to that real quick?
No, I like he said, I mean, everything has to take the backseat to winning this week. You have to be able to move on. And so, like, by this point in the season, you know who your starting lineup is. You know who your starting lineup is by and large. You might have a question on a flex player or whatever, but for the most part, you know who your core 5 or 6 guys are. Those guys have to stay. Other than that, I'm not dropping like my top handcuff to my top back kind of guy. But I mean, if I'm starting 2 or 3 wide receivers, I don't need to keep a 5th wide receiver if it comes down to it. Everything has to take that back. You can burn that bridge when it hatches, to mix a couple of metaphors there. Deal with next week for the most part. Just win, baby. Just win. So yeah, go ahead, be aggressive, drop who you got to drop. I know I've talked the last couple of weeks about saving an extra DST or looking ahead at your DSTs, and you can still do that. But this week has to take precedent over, a cute play for 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo that sentiment in the sense of there is no next week if you don't win this week. So make sure you have the optimized lineup this week. Having said that, as far as the bench goes, here's what I do. I set my lineup for the entire playoffs. I look ahead. What am I going to need these next couple of weeks? All right. I make sure I have the best lineup for this week. But then after that, I might take a few lottery choices. Like, all right, do I have let's say an RB3 who's not going to crack my lineup, and I'm not terrified to have to face at some point? Do I drop him for maybe a lottery handcuff? I might do that. Situations of that nature. It's kind of how I look at a little bit more nuance in that sense, but ultimately the advice is the same. Your league this week needs to be optimized. Plain and simple. All right, so I want to move on to the next one because that was a good philosophical question to kick us off. And we're doing extended start sit questions here today. So let's talk about a little Christian Watson, half-point PPR, versus RJ Harvey, who's got the better combination of floor and ceiling in week 15. I think we just go with who we want to start here. I'm not trying to get into a philosophical debate about who's got the floor, who's got the ceiling. It's who I think is going to score me the most points in week 15. That's what we care about. So Chase, who are you on? You on Christian Watson this week or on RJ Harvey?
If you look at how they've scored this year, Watson actually has had the better scoring floor in terms of his lowest scoring games have outperformed Harvey's. But most of those games for Harvey came earlier in the year when J.K. Dobbins was still around. So Harvey does have the better matchup on paper between the two in terms of who gives up the most points to the fantasy position between the Broncos and the Packers there. But I think Harvey's the clear leader. Interestingly enough, like Watson is still a big shot and he's still capable. I think he's capable of those explosion games, and we've seen it. But when he's seeing less than 6 targets a game, he's pretty volatile that way. I mean, for the most part, he sees usually about 4. That 10 target game 2 weeks ago is really kind of skewing his stats for the year because he hasn't played that many games. So as much as it pains me to say this as a guy who loves Watson and as a Packer fan, I think it's Harvey here. I think that's the play here.
Okay, Adam, disagree, agree.
Yeah, I feel very, very similar actually, which is I saw this question, I wrote in Watson, and then I started looking at it, and I slowly came around to, the usage has been there. We talked about that last week. It's like the efficiency was so bad. We saw a glimpse of hope this past week, and the matchup kind of works out to where you feel good about that potentially being reproducible, and the targets are there, and especially targets plus being the guy in the red zone, like that gives you a pretty solid spot, in half-point PPR. So I lean Harvey. I go with the running back on the tiebreakers a lot anyways, and I think it got really close with Harvey actually looking like an NFL running back this past week, which I'm glad. I loved him a lot coming out.
We've talked a lot on this show about efficiency and about volume and opportunities being king and that kind of thing. Well, okay, here's a perfect case of it. Are you going to take the pretty much guaranteed volume for Harvey, or are you going to bet on the crazy to this point efficiency of Christian Watson? If I have to hedge my bets, I'm gonna go with the volume, the guaranteed volume.
So Chase just switched his answer on the show then, just right there, because you're leaning Watson there.
No, I said I was going Harvey. I said I was going Harvey.
Okay.
I'm going Harvey.
All right.
But,
this was an interesting question. This is a tight one, and I think a lot of the base people are going to be having this week are tight between the players they're going to be choosing from, right? Because you're in the playoffs. We're talking about good players essentially, and you're talking about Watson and his efficiency. The volume's kind of been there. So when you look at Watson, it's hard to bench a guy who's been the wide receiver 7 over the last 4 weeks. And he's scored 3 of the last 4 games. That's a big reason why he's been as good as fantasy-wise as he's been, because he's been scoring touchdowns, something we know Watson can do within his offense. But 82% routes run, 28% target share, clearly the wide receiver. If you're going to own one in Green Bay, clearly the guy that you want to own, right? Now, Chase, to your point, that 10 targets, that's looking more like an aberration than something we should be thinking Watson is actually capable of doing. Most of his games have been between 4 and 6 targets tops. He hasn't had more than, I think, 4 catches in any given game so far since he's been back anyway. The problem is this. I am petrified of the Broncos. Just petrified of the Broncos. I mean, the 4th least fantasy points allowed. They are allowing the least amount of passing yards per play at 5 passing yards per play. Absolutely insane. And they've only allowed 1 wide receiver in the last 4 games to finish as even a starting fantasy wide receiver. Just 1. Petrifying for a guy who doesn't get a ton of volume on a team that's willing to be a super spreader. And more importantly, game script wise, is more than happy to make this thing a grind them out game against Broncos. That terrifies me. Now, RJ Harvey, on the other hand, it's not like his matchup's great against Green Bay. They've been pretty good against the running backs too. But his thing's been built on being inefficient. His thing's been built on having volume consistently. So he's been the running back 10 since becoming the starter. Also, similar to Watson, largely due to touchdowns, because we're talking about a guy who's getting 3.4 yards per carry, only 1.2 yards after contact, and he's only getting 1 missed tackle forced per 32 opportunities. Basically, he's getting what's blocked for him, plus the end zone, plus the touchdowns. Now, the Packers are better at home than they are on the road, but still, the Packers are only allowing the 8th least fantasy points to the running back position and the 9th least rushing yards per play. They've only allowed 1 running back in the last 4 games to score. They held Jahmyr Gibbs to his 2nd worst finish on the year. So ultimately, what wound up happening is this. RJ Harvey is in my top 20-ish of running backs, but I have Christian Watson ranked squarely as a mid-level wide receiver 3. So the volatility of a Christian Watson and the matchup is worse for him in his type of profile, in my opinion, has me on the slight lean with RJ Harvey. I mean, with Harvey, at least you're getting 58% of the snaps, you're getting 59% of the carries, you're getting 12% target share. That's a solid block for a lead back. And that's where I'm going to lean with you guys too. But man, it's a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. I'm not done with Christian Watson, by the way. So RJ Harvey, we all 3 of us took him over Christian Watson. So now the question becomes, and this is a little bit for Adam, but do you want to take Christian Watson or Alec Pierce, who's also been hot as the wide receiver 3 flex play of the week? Adam, I got to kick this to you because there's a lot to talk about with the Colts right now.
Yeah. Look, there's so many unknowns here with Alec Pierce and with this Colts offense, to say the least. Seattle is a very, very tough matchup. The Colts are on a skid with Daniel Jones. So I think at this point, you pretty clearly go Christian Watson to me. I don't really see much to the contrary where you wouldn't. I don't think that Alec Pierce is like panic droppable. I do think that there's a world where there's something here. But there's no chance I'm starting him this week unless I'm extremely, extremely, extremely desperate. And if you have Christian Watson, you are not that.
I mean, Philip Rivers has come to save the day. No, like
I think that there's some nuance here. I don't necessarily think the arm has to be toast, and I don't necessarily think that. I think he probably reads a defense better than Rippon or Leonard. Having said that, How is that body going to hold up to getting hit at all? I don't necessarily feel great about that. I don't necessarily think he's in game shape, and I don't necessarily know what game speed is going to look like for him. So I think we're going to wait and see. I don't necessarily hate the idea of going out of the box because you're kind of, you're screwed with Riley Leonard. You're screwed with Brett Rippon. Maybe there's a non-0% chance with Rivers, but it's not like good. It's not good odds. You don't like the odds.
I think the real problem was that they were hoping Riley Leonard could go, and he got the knee injury. Like, I don't think they make this move if Riley Leonard could have went.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, oh man, it's so brutal. So I gotta get this off my chest real quick. So first of all, as far as the in shape report thing goes, yeah, from what I heard, he's 20 to 30 pounds heavier than what he was back in 2020, last time he played, which should be no surprise. The guy's been retired. He's been being a grandpa. Like, I wouldn't expect you to be in shape. But the one thing that's been driving me crazy when these workouts were going on is like these people were trying to report that, like, oh, Philip Rivers can still rip it. Philip Rivers couldn't rip it 4 years ago. That's why he had to retire, because his arm was already gone. Like, I don't know what we're looking at, what we're talking about. You're telling me 4 years the guy's not been playing football, he can still rip it? He never had an arm to begin with. What do you mean he can still rip it?
Well, so that's why it kind of could still work, because he's functioned without an arm.
Never relied on it to begin with. Yeah.
Oh man, it's just, I said it to you guys in the chat. I mean, this is going to be like the non-mobile version of Riley Leonard, which ain't good. It's not good. It doesn't spell out. So yeah, for me, it's easy. It's Christian Watson. Chase, you disagree or anything there?
No, and it sucks because Pierce was kind of showing the player that we had all hoped that he maybe could be here the last couple weeks, and his play has been good enough. His personal play has been good enough lately that I agree with Adam. He's not a panic drop, but honestly, I don't want a whole hell of a lot to do with anything with this Colts offense. I mean, outside of Jonathan Taylor, and even that's going to be iffy here if teams don't have to worry at all about a pass game. So when you're in must-win situations, I don't want to have to be relying on the Colts passing game this week. So it is Watson over Pierce all day long for me here.
I do want to add a few other actual fantasy notes with the Philip Rivers jokes aside. So the last time we saw Philip Rivers, he was averaging 34 pass attempts a game. And it was about 7.65 air yards per attempt. I don't believe for a second that he's going to come in and throw the ball around 34, 35 times a game. I can't believe that's ever going to be the idea. And then on top of it, you're playing Seattle. They've only allowed one wide receiver in the last 4 games to even finish inside the top 20, and that was Puka Nacua. Basically saying, like, I'm not in on the Colts receivers, period, heading into this matchup. If I was going to be in on anybody, it would be Michael Pittman, because I think you saw a taste of an example this past Sunday. Ryan Leonard comes in, it's short, middle, constantly ticking, and that's all Michael Pittman's territory or Tyler Warren's territory. I think you're going to see something very, very similar with Philip Rivers. If anybody were to eat, it would be Pittman or Tyler Warren, in my opinion.
Do we have an over-under on how many times in the broadcast they mentioned Philip Rivers' 37 and a half children?
No, it's going to be high. I'll take the over constantly.
Children, that's an Operation Domination drinking game for this Sunday.
There you go. I love it.
Every time they mention his kids drink.
It's good for the NFL because the Rivers signing is the only reason this game's at least watchable.
That's fair.
And it's kind of a morbid curiosity thing, but it's like, people will watch it for a reason.
It's better than
see him die on the field.
Rippin', nobody watches this game. It's like 17 people know what happened.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's all about the glory at the end of the day, right? All right, so let's get back to it. Full point PPR in the flex position. Amari and Hampton, RJ Harvey, who we've talked about, or Ashton Jeanty. This is how far we've died on Ashton Jeanty. Like, whew, it's brutal. Chase, where do you fall on this one?
It's Harvey first, for all the reasons that we kind of talked about before in terms of his opportunities in that. It would be Hampton for me, but I don't know that Hampton is going to be the dead ass lead back in that backfield for this coming week, at least. He wasn't necessarily the lead back on this previous game here with Kamani Vidal.
31%.
Yep. Vidal has played well, and they even came. I mean, there was a quote I think from Harbaugh this week about what they asked him, like, "Okay, hey, were you just kind of trying to ease Hampton back in, or is that going to be the split?" And he was like, he was really non-committal in his answer in terms of like saying who he thought was going to be the star. He's like, it's impossible to tell who's going to, how these things are going to shake out game to game. So I'm not overly confident that Hampton is going to be the lead back. I know Harvey will be. And then Jeanty is obviously the only thing going for that Raiders team, but that's the part of the problem. I mean, outside of Brock Bowers, but now there's nobody to throw the ball to Brock Bowers. They already have a terrible offensive line. Ashton Jeanty gets hit almost before he gets the handoff, seemingly on every play. He is constantly getting hit in the backfield before he even has a chance to get going. I still think Jeanty is the player that I thought he was before, but they have to fix that freaking team in a hurry, and it's not going to happen this season, obviously. So for me, it's Harvey and then Hampton and then Jeanty, especially now that the quarterback situation is up in the air in Vegas. So
that's interesting. Adam, what do you got here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Harvey is definitely the number one. I would struggle to see otherwise, at least until we see more out of Hampton. In regards to seeing more out of Hampton, I do have it the other way. And it's not because of what Jeanty is doing on the ground, which we would have thought coming out of college, but he has 8 targets in like 4 out of the last 5 games. Like he gets a receiving workload that gives you a little bit of a floor and something that you can kind of accept. And with Hampton, we saw him play 30% of the snaps. Hopefully, I think we all think that should go up. I don't want to play with an unknown like that in the playoffs. I really don't. I'm rather confident that Jeanty will get the opportunities. They're low quality opportunities. It sucks, but I'm confident I can get 10 out of Jeanty. It is very, very possible that we get 10 carries for 40 yards and nothing else out of Hampton. You have 4 points and you are feeling really, really bad about your situation. So I think it's Harvey, but to me, I'd go the other way on that other point. A stat to why, by the way, the Jeanty thing is so putrid. From week 11 to now, by the way, Jeanty does have 100% of their red zone carries. That number just happens to be 4 red zone carries.
It's
you have to get to the red zone before you can carry it there.
That is his problem. They have to get to the red zone, and they do not do that.
It isn't. So I'm really tempted to hit the showdown. Okay, so here's the deal. I disagree with the both of you that RJ Harvey's first. I am on Ashton Jeanty first. However, I have Ashton Jeanty 15, RJ Harvey 17. I'm not talking about much of a gap here, so I don't know how much I want to hit the showdown when it's all said and done. But here, I'll give you the reasons why I'm on Jeanty more than RJ Harvey. I already laid out what's going on with Harvey, right? It's all about volume. He is getting opportunities to score. As you guys just alluded to, Jeanty's not, okay? And that's what happens when you're on the 32nd ranked scoring offense in the NFL and you have Kenny Pickett now who's going to be the quarterback. Totally understand that. Totally get it. You want to talk about volume. Adam, you alluded to it a little bit, but the last 4 weeks, he's getting 89% of the team carries and 20% target share. I'm going to say that again. 89% of the carries and a 20% target share. Outside of Christian McCaffrey, no other running back is getting that kind of volume on their team. You're playing against the Eagles, who are a good matchup for running backs. They've given up the 5th most receiving yards to the running backs, 8th most fantasy points per game. But the more thing I'm queuing on is the dump offs. Here's the one thing I think Kenny Pickett will do more than Geno Smith. Dump the ball off. Yep. That's the one thing I think he will do more often. As a result, we saw it on Monday. Kamani Vidal had 60 yards on the first play. Amarian Hampton scored his touchdown on a reception. So if Ashton Jeanty stays involved in the passing game, I do believe he will have a strong mid-level RB2 type of ball game where I don't need him necessarily to score. Where RJ Harvey, if he doesn't score, he's an RB3, RB4. You're going to regret starting him for fantasy football purposes, in my opinion. Amarian Hampton, I'm kind of with you guys. I'm projecting him for a 50-50 split this week. I think it goes up from what it was last week. And I think there's something to be said for the fact that while he only played 31% of the snaps, he still had over 15 opportunities and still scored a touchdown. So whenever he was on the field, they made a point to get him the football. That tells me that's a team who's ready to ride him a little bit more as long as he responded well heading into next week. I still think Vidal is probably more of the pass catching back. I do think this week in particular, it might be more like 50-50, but I think we're trending towards it being back to Amarian Hampton by week 16. but it's the Chiefs. I've seen the Chiefs shut down some elite running backs this season. So while I'm looking for his playing time to increase, I don't know if his fantasy points do. So I got him in Hampton as an RB3, squarely behind both of Ashton Jeanty and RJ Harvey. I'm slightly on Jeanty given the matchup and just the receiving volume I'm expecting him to have. We'll see what happens there. All right, so Luther Burden, is he finally a locked-in Week 15 flex, or is he still more of a boom or bust bench stash? Chase, where are you following this?
He's a stash for me. He's a stash. I can't have him as a locked-in anything. Honestly, I mean, Rome Odunze, and as far as receivers on that team, Odunze, if you look at his stats, he hasn't necessarily been any better than a flex play for the most part this season in terms of the points that he's giving you. And I just wonder, what has Burden shown so far that says he's going to be any different at this point? Last week was supposed to be, like the big coming out party because Odunze was going to miss the game, and they all thought it was a perfect matchup there.
Well, what he did, butt and roll there real quick. What he did show was that apparently he's still better than DJ Moore.
And there is that, but there's a low bar this year. That is a low bar this year in particular. I agree though with that. I will not refute that statement. But I mean, otherwise, what has he shown us this year? He's got 165-yard touchdown catch back in like week 3 or 4 that has people still clinging to the preseason hype. I still love Luther Burden as a player. I liked him in the draft process. I've been a big Luther Burden guy. I loved him going to Ben Johnson's offense. It's just they haven't used him like we all want him to be used yet. And I like him better as a player on my dynasty roster than my playoff ones right now. So I'm not going to call Luther Burden anything more than a stash at this point.
Adam, disagree, agree.
No, I think flex conversation entering that. Yeah. Sure. I'll give you that much. Talk about him. He's not anything more than a desperation flex. He's if you were relying on Alec Pierce as your flex previously, then he might be your fallback.
Yeah, boom. Yes. Let's do that. Yeah.
Oh, I don't understand the flex conversation. Again, unless you're in 14-team leagues, maybe, I guess. But I don't understand the flex conversation for a guy who's still not even playing enough to be in the flex. So Rome Odunze was out last week. Luther Burden still only played 69% of the routes. That was it. 69% of routes run. That's not enough to be considered a wide receiver 3 or flex play, period. Now, some people might get locked in on the 21% target share. But again, ultimately, if you're not playing enough on the field, that becomes volatile as whether or not you get the volume. You're playing against Cleveland this week, right? Is it Cleveland? No, it's not Cleveland.
Yes,
it is
Chicago, Cleveland. Yes,
I was having a brain fart moment. Yes,
you're playing Chicago. In Chicago,
in Chicago, you're playing Cleveland this week. You're going into a grind 'em out football game. Ben Johnson has made it clear. Look, I want to limit how much I expose Caleb Williams and his slow ticker to get through those progressions. Good God. That's a conversation I'll be getting into for dynasty purposes, in a few weeks from now, I'll tell you that much. And run the ball. And then if we do throw it, Loveland's the guy that I want to play, not anybody else. He's the only one with a set role that I can trust, has a certain featured aspect in his offense right now of hey, play action, get the ball out to Loveland consistently enough, especially for a tight end purposes. And that's what we're seeing right now. It's become a super spreader offense that's a run-first team. It's not unlike Buffalo. Chicago has much better weapons, much better wide receivers, but they're producing about the same. So that's where it makes it hard for me. So no, Luther Burden, I don't even know. If you're in redraft leagues, I don't think Luther Burden's even a guy I need to roster, let alone saying he's a boomer bust or a flex stash. I don't know. That's where I fall on this. So no, we're all not on that one. Okay, so how about this?
Going back to the very first question that we had about how aggressive you could be dropping dudes. Yeah, don't feel bad if you're dropping Luther Burden for somebody.
100%. Even if Rome Odunze misses this week too, by the way. Here's a great question. I told you guys these were going to be tough. This one I shook my head out like, woof. All right, so between Chimere, Dike, Jerry Jeudy, and Darius Slayton, which one of these waiver wide receiver pickups are you most comfortable starting this week, Adam?
For me, it's Dike. I think Dike and Jeudy are both extremely boomer bust. Slayton a little bit more, reliable, but also not much of a ceiling. At least largely not much of a ceiling. with Dike, though, that boomer bust is like a true 50-50. Jeudy's had like 2 or 3 pop-off games this season, and that's it. So to me, like when you get granular between those two, it's Dike all the way. And then between Slayton and Dike, I think this is likely if you're talking about like my last flex spot and somewhere where I can afford to be like a little bit more adventurous. Like I'd just rather have the boomer bust guy. But that becomes a little bit more talking about what your team makeup is. Like, do you need the guaranteed 10 or are you trying to like get the most points you possibly can, where I think your answer is Dike. I think for most teams, the answer is Dike, especially if you're having this conversation. If it's I'm trying to just get my projected points, then maybe Slayton's an option. But candidly, I think if you're the favorite in your matchup, you're probably not having this conversation. You are probably the underdog if you're having this conversation. And in that case, you probably want Dike.
Okay. Chase, where you fall on this?
I really want to say yes because Dike is an ex-Badger. I know he got drafted out of Florida. I don't care. He's an ex-Badger for me.
That's technically true.
It is very definitely technically true. But
to claim guys just blows my mind.
I know. I like the guy. I was sad to see him go, and I'm glad he's doing well now. I'm happy to see it. I have nothing against the kid. Jeudy has the best matchup on paper. And he probably has, honestly, the biggest potential of these 3 players in a game. Slayton has the best quarterback by far, but Slayton doesn't see any kind of volume on any kind of consistent basis for me to think that there's any kind of ceiling play here for Slayton. Dike has the most buzz lately, but again, a lot of his value comes as a returner. And if you're not in a return league, I don't know that I want to count on that. He's only got 3 games where he's seen more than 5 targets. He doesn't have a 100-yard game yet this season. Ward is not playing great, although he's been marginally better lately. If you want to come down to the quarterback debate between Jeudy and Dike, I don't know. I mean, Shough, I'm not a Shough guy, but maybe there's something there. I mean, maybe there's a spark to be had there. For me, it's just Jeudy based on the player that I know he has been and can be, and the fact that I think he's got the biggest boom potential out of these 3. But I agree with that. Yeah, if you're talking about one of these 3 guys, you got an uphill climb regardless. So good luck. I hope the rest of your roster comes through.
I want to lead off with this. For all the people out there saying that Cleveland Browns are setting up Shedeur Sanders to fail, you're a moron. And I don't apologize for calling you a moron as such. Now, I agree with everybody that they were being unfair to him early on in the process. They're not setting him up to fail now. First, they're giving him an opportunity to see what he can do in the NFL level. That's what he gets from being named starter. So the same people who are clamoring for Shedeur Sanders are now saying he's getting set up to fail. It makes absolutely no sense. You guys are morons. I just wanted to put that out there. But anyway, now I got that off my chest. He does stink. So I don't think he's a franchise quarterback regardless. Last week, people are now clenching to this. It was the Tennessee friggin' Titans. The Tennessee Titans is one of the worst defenses in the entire league. And Shedeur Sanders, for the first time this season, showed like a pulse to be able to put up some sort of production. And now I'm supposed to just buy in? I don't think so. And it's proven in Jerry Jeudy. Last week was a wide receiver 12 finish for him. That's an aberration. He had been the wide receiver 76 leading into last week. 76. And he's supposed to be the leading wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns. Chicago Bears defense has been better. He's by far the 3rd guy on my list when it comes to these 3. Talking about Dike and Slayton. I agree with you guys that Dike does have an upside to be had. The 49ers giving up the 12th most points to the wide receiver position. Cam Moore's been playing better, still inconsistent, but better. Dike gets the matchup against Upton Stout, which is the matchup that you want for any wide receiver to go out there. And he's been the wide receiver 38 over the last 4 games. 87% of the routes run, 20% target share. He's coming off a game where he had 33% target share. So he's in the conversation. To me, this is Darius Slayton this week, though. So we want to talk about playing time. Slayton finally, since the injury, since the bye, got back to running 90% of the routes. Right before the bye, was back to running 90% of the routes. So he's back to where he used to be. The Giants under Kafka are running an insane amount of 11 personnel. Just absolutely insane. So it's him, it's Hodgins, it's Wan'Dale Robinson, and Slayton's got the healthy ADOT. He's got the 14 yards ADOT. So that tells me, okay, you got the opportunity to make the big plays. And then you have the matchup. Commanders are allowing the 8th most fantasy points to the wide receivers. They have allowed 3 300-yard performances over the last 5 games. I'm not saying Jackson Dart goes for 300 yards. I'm just saying he's got an easier pathway than what he had last week. And therefore, all the wide receivers have the opportunity to eat as well. And by the way, the Commanders are better with Marcus Mariota than they are with a hurt Jaden Daniels. I think they're going to put up points against this Giants team. We might see a mini shootout in this game. Here's what worries me about Dike. While the 49ers defense is not good, when they've played against mediocre quarterbacks this season, they have dominated like they're supposed to, a la Bryce Young, some of the other guys that they've been able to play. So I do think there's a chance here that Cam Ward winds up stinking. Because
there's more than a chance. There's more.
Yeah, it's Salah against bad quarterbacks, even with a undermanned defense, equals not a lot of points, in my opinion. So I am leaning Slayton. He actually is the only one of these 3 receivers who cracks my top 36 heading into this week as well.
That's a 3-way dance, everybody. That's like old school ECW wrestling there, because Adam, myself, and Dan have all just chosen a different person for the answer on this question. So that's nice.
Good luck.
Have fun with that. Yeah. Hope we answered. Hope we helped whoever had that question.
All right. Next up, we got Blake Corum or Devin Neal as my RB2. This is another one that I'm going to have to go off on at some point after I hear your guys' answers. But so these people are asking Blake Corum or Devin Neal as my RB2 PPR with the playoffs on the line in week 15. Chase, which way do you lean?
I don't think we see Kamara this week. I don't necessarily know that we see Kamara the rest of the season. I'm sure you'll be talking with Dr. Brian Scott about that here this week as well. But I don't think we see Kamara, so it's Neal for me. He's got a much better matchup on paper. He's going to be the guy. We know he'll be the guy in that backfield, and I'm not worried about Taysom Hill's possibilities or anything else going on in that world down there in New Orleans. Corum is still the 1B at best in that offense. It's a much better offense. It really is, but he's still the 1B at best in that offense against one of the toughest fantasy run defenses in the league in Detroit there. So I'm going with Neal on this one.
Adam, how do you see this?
Yeah, I am also going Neal. I mean, I'll throw the caveat in there that I give a slight edge to Corum in the unlikely, like I don't believe it exists world that Kamara plays. But in the reality that I'm living in, Kamara doesn't play, and I'm going to go with Neal. The thing to me with Corum is that it just doesn't feel sustainable. Right. He's still behind Kyron in the red zone. And admittedly, he's cut into it. Like, no debate, he has cut into it 100%. But he is still behind him in the red zone. He doesn't catch the ball. 10 yards per carry is not sustainable. That's not real. Achane held it up for, I think, longer than any of us would like to believe like was possible. And I don't. Corum's explosive, but he's not Achane. Like that was an anomaly that we saw his rookie season where he held that for a couple of weeks there. And I don't see it being reality. I think obviously the Arizona game was a bit of game script like that. That was the Rams game from midway through the first. Like, was never in doubt. And Carolina wasn't that much different, to be honest with you. So I just think it's one of those situations where, Corum's just hard to project the efficiency being what it is, but there's not a lot of opportunities. Devin Neal gets a lot of opportunities and catches the ball a lot too.
Yeah, so there was a few questions that I did not put into our list that I was getting that was blowing my mind on how much love there is for Blake Corum. Like, some people out there must think that Blake Corum actually overtook Kyron Williams at some point, like that, like it happened. And I'm like, what are we doing?
That's people that have him on their dynasty rosters and they're just hopeful.
No, these are redraft. I can attest to these redraft, like questions like, Javonte Williams or Blake Corum or RJ Harvey and Blake Corum or Quinshon Judkins and Blake Corum, or my favorite one, especially this week, given the matchup, Travis Etienne or Blake Corum. Like, calm down. So I put in this one. This one is at least more debatable, because Devin Neal, even with the workload that he's been getting, which is about 62% of the carries and 8% targets since Kamara's been out. And Adam, I'm with you. I'd be shocked if we saw Alvin Kamara again at all, this season. He's still an RB3. That's still where I kind of have him ranked at. I have him ranked more as a high-end RB3. He's got a decent matchup against Carolina this week, sure, but it's not if he doesn't score, you have a low floor. Right? You might have a base, but you have a low floor. And you don't necessarily have that 100-yard pop game because Devin Neal doesn't necessarily have that type of explosion. So I understand all that. So this makes it more of a question. But guys, Blake Corum, as great as he's been, Adam mentioned it. It's mostly because the last 2 weeks he's had a plus 10 yards per carry. He's still, with all the fantasy points that he put up last week and the last 4 weeks, because last 4 weeks he's been the running back 27. He's still only playing during that time between 34 and 37% of the snaps. That's a third. He's playing a third of the time. He has not overtaken Kyren Williams. It's been fun, but here's two things that are happening. Either he's being uber efficient or the Rams are blowing out their opponents and he's getting to run the ball like crazy in the fourth quarter. That's where a lot of his workload is coming from. It's not throughout the course of the game where it's a true 50-50 split with Kyren Williams. No, it is not. That is not what we have seen. So we need to make sure people understand this in context of what's actually happening out there on the field. 37% of the carries and only 3% targets. That is a backup player who happened to go off against a terrible run defense because he was being uber efficient. Period. So let's not get crazy about Blake Corum. I would definitely play Devin Neal, who's a actual starting running back right now, than Blake Corum.
If this question was Alvin Kamara or Blake Corum, I don't think people would be quite so quick to jump on Corum. And I know Kamara hasn't been great this season, but Devin Neal has given you basically what, as the starter, Devin Neal has been giving you what exactly Alvin Kamara had been giving you anyway. And I don't think that people would be jumping to start Corum over Kamara, even if it was just based on name value. But you have to let go of the name value. You have to let go of of the hype, like we just talked about with Corum. Look at what they're giving you. Yeah, it's Neal for me this week. I want Corum to be something. I'm just not necessarily so sure that you can bank on it here in the fantasy playoffs.
No, and I would even tell you in Dynasty, maybe it's next year, but it's really not because they have Kyren Williams that extension.
Locked up for a while.
This is kind of the role I think we're going to see him in, is in a committee-ish role moving forward.
And that's something to remember for both of them going forward.
Well, yeah, but I also want to throw this out here too. So you laid it out. They're playing Detroit. It was a much better run defense, but this is going to be a much more competitive game.
Yes.
In games that are competitive, Kyren Williams plays a lot more. That's how that works. So just to kind of put the final stamp on that one. All right. We're waiting for Adam to get back. His internet kicked out. So hopefully we'll see him again in a few minutes. In the meantime, we do have a quarterback streaming question coming in. So Sam Darnold versus Trevor Lawrence in week 15. And I do think this one is close, but Jason, I want to see what you have to say about it first.
Well, listen, I know what Adam thinks, and I think Adam is trying to be a kind, he's trying not to be a homer. I am going with Lawrence over Darnold this week, to be honest. I think Seattle is going to be in run mode most of that game. We've kind of already talked about what a disaster I think the Colts are going to turn into now that they don't have Danny Dimes, my guy, manning the quarterback position there. So I think Seattle's going to be run mode most of that game. I think there is just it's a slight chance, but there is the slightest chance that the Jets at least make that Jacksonville game competitive enough that Lawrence is still in play in the second half, where I'm just not so sure that the Seattle is going to need anything out of Darnold. Now, can he get lucky and maybe toss? I mean, he's going to throw 11 times to Jackson Smith and Jigman no matter what. But I think that Lawrence is probably the one who is in the competitive game for longer and therefore has to maybe throw a little bit more. So for me, I'm going Lawrence over Darnold this week.
Yeah, I have Lawrence actually ranked inside my top 10 and Darnold ranked outside my top 12. So I do have Lawrence as actually a need to, let's say, starting quarterback one for this week. He's been on fire.
Yeah.
He's been on absolute fire. He's been the quarterback 7 over the past 4 weeks. Darnold's been the quarterback 24 during that same stretch. Now, what's happened? And I think the same thing might happen this week. The defense has dominated really bad, in particular, bad quarterback teams. And as a result, what it's led to is the defense dominating and therefore the offense not having to do very much.
Yeah.
And that's been the number one issue that Sam Darnold's kind of run into. And then on the mix it in here, the games that Darnold did go off were in plus matchups. Anytime he's against a team that is somewhat competitive on defense, we see Sam Darnold just, throw for like $150 and a touchdown, and that's about it. It's not really great fantasy purpose-wise, and he's not running. Lawrence is running again. That's a big thing about what's happening right now. So not only has he thrown for 8 touchdowns in the last 4 games, but he's also mixing in the rushing again. So since Brenton Strange returned, since BTJ has returned, we've actually gotten back to this being a more balanced offense that's working pretty efficiently at the moment. I do worry about game script. So you mentioned you think the Jets have a better chance to make this competitive. I will say this, and I will talk about this with Dr. Brian Scott tomorrow, but neither Tyrod Taylor or Justin Fields are playing. If it is Brady Cook, I am a little bit worried about them having enough of a juice to keep Trevor Lawrence competitive into the second half. And I think the Jaguars might pull a Seattle Seahawk in some instances here. So I'm a little concerned about that. I will say that. But right now, Trevor Lawrence has just been flat out the hotter hand, and that's the one I'm going to try to roll with. Adam, we lost you there for a second. So where were you falling on the whole Sam Darnold, Trevor Lawrence question?
I have Darnold, and for me, I don't think, like you were just saying, the plus matchup on the defensive side of the ball, I don't think it is. And candidly, it's Sauce is out, Ward's out. Like what? What defense? Yeah, those are quarters.
But yeah, who's throwing the ball again? Yeah.
The Jets don't have Sauce anymore. They've been bad on defense too.
No, Darnold.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. But I'm saying the Jets don't even have Sauce anymore.
Oh, well, yeah.
They don't have corners either.
But point being, when Darnold is good, when he plays bad defenses, I think that's the reality of what Darnold's doing. Point being, and I think Lawrence is like, regardless of matchup, you max out at 30 pass attempts. Not that you don't do that with Darnold, but with Darnold, we've seen, I think, more consistent swings, both good and bad. Versus Lawrence until 3 weeks ago was like, yeah, you're getting like 10 to 15 points, and then he played a string of bad defenses in a row, at least in my opinion.
Well, bad defense, and he got some weapons back, which I think that formula is still in play for this week.
Yeah.
We'll see. I don't know. Do we want to do a showdown?
I don't have a big difference, but
I would not be shocked if Darnold has a nice game. If Darnold has a good game, though, it's because Smith and Jigba has another one of these 8 of 10 for 100 yards and 2 scored games, like he has done 2 or 3 times in the last 4 weeks.
I've seen JSN go off for like $150 and 2 touchdowns, and Sam Darnold still not put up a good fantasy number because all of his passing production only went to one player.
Exactly, but and that was my original point, was that like even if JSN eats, it doesn't necessarily mean Darnold does enough to outscore Lawrence. But if Darnold does have a startable day, he will not do that unless JSN has a monster game. So.
No, that's fair enough too. So I say Lawrence, Chase says Lawrence, Adam says Sam Darnold. I was going to say the only way it's Sam Darnold is if Philip Rivers makes it more competitive than we were all expecting to, but I don't think I can get through that with a straight face. All right, so let's talk about a little super flex action here. This is a good one. Can I trust Jacoby Brissett over a rookie like Tyler Shough this week, or is just too much rushing upside to bench for Tyler Shough? Adam, take it away.
Well, I want to give Tyler Shough some credit first before I smash him down. Shough, I think, has genuinely entered over the last month the conversation of, I think you are more than likely should be starting for most teams in a Superflex QB2 situation. I think you are there.
Okay.
Jacoby Brissett is a bona fide. He should be starting in most 12-team redraft leagues. One QB, he is a QB1 genuine starter. That's what Jacoby Brissett is. So it's Jacoby Brissett by a mile, but I actually do think there are dynasty leagues, 12-team dynasty leagues, where Shough is a starter on and potentially playing in your playoffs, and you don't feel that bad about it. I mean, he has shown some good things, including on the ground. So the question's a little bit much. I think the 45 pass attempts a game from Brissett trumps any rushing upside that Shough may or may not have, which he didn't look great running. He just kept doing it. But nonetheless, you got in the end zone. He's clearly willing to do it. I feel like he's an okay QB2, like I said, but But come on, Jacoby Brissett is like around the QB6 over the last month and a half. Like, I'm going to keep riding with that personally because the attempts hasn't gone down. Like, he's getting it in a sustainable way. Like, this isn't like with some of these other quarterbacks where it's like, oh, you're going on this run, but you're throwing like 30 pass attempts a game, kind of like my problem with Lawrence, which is also true with Darnold. But nonetheless, like, the attempts just aren't actually there for it to feel sustainable. It's sustainable for Brissett. He's throwing 10 attempts a quarter, if not more. Like, at that point, and negative game scripts most of the time too. He's going down the field.
Yeah, no, I mean, to boost your point a little bit about Shough, I do have as my quarterback 18 this week. So yeah, we definitely have him in the Superflex leagues. Chase, how do you see this?
I love what Adam said about the idea of Shough being startable in Superflex format and not just startable, but should be starting. He's not startable. He's a starter in Superflex. And I agree with that completely, but I'm still trusting Brissett. Even though he's got a tougher matchup this week, I'm trusting Brissett over Shough. I think he's earned that. Plus, if you look at their most trusted receivers that they both have, I like Brissett's most trusted receivers in McBride and Michael Wilson over who Shough is throwing to on the whole. I like Chris Olave as a player, but on the whole, I like the people that Brissett is throwing to more. The question as posed was, would you trust Brissett over rookies like Shough? And I would kind of extrapolate this out to first or second year starters. I'll tell you what, I would play Drake May and I would play Jackson Dart over Jacoby Brissett.
Are they like Shough? Are those?
No, they're not like Shough, but I'm talking about first and second players. I would not play Ward over Shough. I would not play JJ McCarthy over Shough. I would not play Caleb Williams this week over Shough. In terms of first and second year starters, I would play May and Dart over. I would play May and Dart over Brissett. I would not play Ward, McCarthy, or Caleb over Brissett. And Shough wise, I would play Shough over probably almost everybody on the list except for maybe Caleb. I'd play Caleb over Shough.
Okay. None of those rookies that you just listed, but I mean, we can stretch that.
I said first or second year play. I'm because JJ McCarthy is a second year player, but he's a rookie as a starter for all intents and purposes.
No, so I think this question came because of the matchup with Houston, which, look, it's terrifying. Houston is in a different world right now as far as that defense goes. That defensive line, I don't know if I've seen a more dominant defensive line. And I'm even thinking about the defensive lines of the Giants that won them Super Bowls. Like, I don't even know if that defensive line is as good as this one in the Houston Texans. And the Cardinals just lost Paris Johnson, their left tackle. It's a scary situation. I get it. To Adam's point, the guy is throwing between 40 and 50 times a game. I think that negates the defense to some degree in the sense of like there's at least a high-end quarterback to floor with Jacoby Brissett, right? Like you said, he's been the QB6 over the last 4 weeks. Now, I do not have Jacoby Brissett ranked as a top 12 quarterback this week because of the matchup, but he is still a high-end QB2. I have him ranked at quarterback 14. So if we're talking super flex, still have him a healthy distance ahead of Shough. It's a little bit closer than I would have maybe expected, but I do have a healthy distance over Shough. What made me laugh about this question was when they mentioned the rushing upside to Tyler Shough. That made me giggle. So I know he's coming off of a game where he had 7 carries, 55 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns, right? And that's where this is coming from. The 7 carries, by the way, that's not anything different than we've seen over the last 3 weeks. He's been 6 or 7 carries the whole time. The difference is that he got 55 yards and 2 touchdowns, where before he was only getting like 18 to 22 yards with no touchdowns. Tyler Shough had a nice 40 because nobody else in the quarterback room ran it, and there wasn't that many good mobile quarterbacks this year to begin with. This is not a dual threat by any means. All right, he's mobile enough to do a little bit of something. Okay, but this isn't a guy I'm going into like, I need that rushing upside out of Tyler Shough. Yeah, that's where I'm going to get my... No, this is not...
It's like saying you want the rushing upside of like Tony Romo back in the day.
Yeah,
it's like, exactly. Yeah, on like third and 8 and man coverage, he will run for it. But
and Brissett is giving you the, like you just said, Dan, 18, 22 yards. Right. Brissett's doing that himself running.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's like Nick Foles when he was in the Chip Kelly offense, where Nick Foles was actually getting like 35-ish rushing yards, and you were like, oh, yeah. I mean, it's something. It's not nothing. It's not what I'm pinning my fantasy hopes on, though. But I did want to mention, Shough has been playing a lot better.
Yes.
But the Panthers are actually a tough matchup for quarterbacks. So they've allowed their 8th least amount of fantasy points to the quarterbacks. And while I think about Carolina, I'm like, all right, is that really real? Is it really just in context? Well, they actually held Matthew Stafford to his 2nd worst fantasy finish of the year. So this is actually not a great match for Tyler Shough either. So in that case, I'm going with the guy who gives me 40 to 50 pass attempts in a game, just to kind of put it all together. All right. Our last question we're going to get to before we get to the DFS Cocktail Hour. I always try to get the one defensive question in here. So we got one in for week 15. This person asked Jacksonville Jaguars, San Francisco 49ers, or the Dallas Cowboys. Which is the safest play if I need a floor, Adam?
Yeah, well, if you need a floor, the Cowboys aren't even in the conversation because their floor is in the negatives.
Even against JJ McCarthy?
I mean, I feel better about it against JJ McCarthy, but we've seen bad offenses beat up on the Cowboys.
This is fair.
I don't feel great about the Cowboys. They're for me, they're not in the conversation.
They got Quentin Williams.
Oh yeah, better, sure. The Pee Wee team was better than what they were before. Yeah, they're better. They are better, but they're better against the run, and that's not necessarily what they need to be worried about this week. Justin Jefferson's still good. JJ McCarthy obviously very bad, but
is Jefferson even out there? Does he have a pulse?
McCarthy doesn't throw to Jefferson, so yeah, I mean that negates that whole.
I think against the Dallas Cowboys defense, it might be a little different than.
He just played against Washington.
You'd like to think so, but
Washington was never a game because of how bad the Washington offense was.
Fair, but still, did you see JJ McCarthy? Justin Jefferson after that game?
Oh, he's flustered. He's
like, I like us winning.
That's such a polite way to put it.
Losing, not getting. The dude looks like he's ready to take JJ McCarthy out back and beat him like a rug.
I'm sure a lot of people in that organization are. Let's be clear, but again, the Dallas Cowboys defense. If there will ever be a get back game for one of the best receivers in the last 10 years, this is where it happens. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't, and also, come on, it's the Dallas Cowboys defense. They could get ran over, even with Quentin Williams. So
who is your answer?
The answer for me is the Jaguars. It's slightly over the Niners. The Jaguars defense has been pretty solid. They've had their ups and downs throughout the season, but they've given you some good situations. That matchup is good. Obviously, we talked about the matchup a little bit on the defensive side for the Jets, but the quarterback situation's a little silly over there. Yeah, I like the Jets quite a bit, both upside and floor. I think even with a Tyrod or a Justin, doesn't really matter. You'd feel good about it. Brady Cook, yeah, I'm going with the Jacks.
Yeah, Chase, you see that any differently?
I mean, listen, it's Jacksonville, especially with the floor question. I think San Francisco is just going to be kind of meh this week because they've kind of been meh all year, in my opinion. But I'm tempted. Maybe this is my anti-Viking. I will admit this might be my anti-Viking bias, but I'm tempted by the Dallas play against Minnesota because I don't trust JJ. And if there was ever a week that Dallas's defense could actually come out and play defense, it's against the Vikings, who are allowing the most points to opposing fantasy DSTs. They are the best matchup for fantasy DSTs, and the 3-touchdown complete aberration that was last week for JJ McCarthy, I don't see that replaying even against Dallas. But it's Jacksonville. I'll agree with him. It's Jacksonville.
Well, I mean, that's why you play DFS. That's why that's where you play the Dallas Cowboys.
Exactly. Bingo. That's where you take your shot and for a cheap play and save some money to be able to boost yourself somewhere else.
Well, you mentioned San Francisco's going to be meh. I just want to put this out there. They've been the 9th best scoring defense for the last 4 weeks, and mostly because of who they've been playing, right? And
better lately.
Tennessee's no different.
Well, no,
it's all because of who they've been playing. Beating up on Cleveland, beating up on crappy teams with crappy quarterbacks, Bryce Young. But and Tennessee's no different. So I want to mention that San Francisco's in my top 10. Jacksonville, over the past 4 weeks, they haven't just been good or better. They've been number 2 to just Seattle. Like, they are the number 2 defense right behind the Seattle Seahawks. And then they get a matchup like Seattle does with the quarterback situation. And because I don't think Tyrod's playing this week. I don't think Justin Fields is playing this week. It's not looking very good. So we're going to throw out Brady Cook against a defense who's been hot. Oh, man, yeah. I'm looking at my
They did bring in Joe Namath, though, to talk, too. So, again, like the Colts, they may have an old man, too, in their back pocket.
I thought it was Brett Favre. Brett Favre would be funnier. But yeah, so Jaguars all the way across.
Mark Sanchez.
Right. Yeah.
Bring back the Sanchez, man. He's younger. He might be younger than Rivers.
Doesn't he need to get out of prison?
Mark Sanchez? Well, yeah, I suppose. Yeah, but either way.
he's
younger than Phillip Rivers, I'm sure of it.
And unemployed once again.
And he has no job. So
what is this, longest yard?
Give a brother a break.
I need a drink.
Yes. Well, I mean, I know we're talking DFS, but it is the playoff time of year. Okay. And in DFS is basically every week is one and done anyway. And you're one and done here now in the playoffs as well. You have to win this game or you're going to be out. So our cocktail this week is one and done is what we're calling it. It's going to be kind of a riff on a Long Beach iced tea, which is itself a variation on a Long Island iced tea. But let's get into the players that we're going to roll with this week. We've kind of talked about this game on and off all night long here. Detroit and the Rams. It's the highest over/under total on the Vegas, slate here at 55 points. Last I looked, the Rams are slight favorites at 5.5 points. I haven't used this dude all year. I'm going to roll with Matthew Stafford at 7,000 here. He's the quarterback 2 in salary, but he's also the quarterback 2 in the ECR rankings this week. He's your quarterback 4 on the season, points per game and overall. He leads the league in touchdown passes by 9 scores over Jared Goff. I mean, this is a guy that has been just on fire all season. He's got 35 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. He's just on an incredible pace. He's on pace for 45 touchdowns and 5 interceptions and almost 4,400 yards. That would be his first 4,000 plus yard season since 2021, which was his first year out in Los Angeles there. Normally, we like to try to play a running quarterback or a guy that's got at least some kind of threat to the run. And Stafford is actually on pace for negative rush yards this season, and he has not had a rushing touchdown since 2022, but he's passing so damn well, it really doesn't matter. Okay, he's had multiple passing scores in 7 straight games. He's facing a Detroit Lions defense that allows the 5th most points to opposing quarterbacks. He has the absolute best 1-2 punch in the entire league at wide receiver in terms of, talking about Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. So we're going to roll with Matthew Stafford at 7,000. We'll pay up there and we'll be happy to do it. And we are going to pair him by also paying up for Puka Nacua at 8,700. He is the wide receiver 1 in salary this week. He's the wide receiver 2 ECR wise. He's the wide receiver 2 on the season behind only JSN. But he leads the league in receptions. And he's only done it in only 12 games. He's only played in 12 games as opposed to the 13 that a lot of other guys have played. He's actually averaging more targets per game than Jackson Smith and Jigba is, which is wild considering that he's got Devontae Adams in the house that he has to compete with for looks. And JSN has, I don't know, nobody. I'm not talking about the corpse of Cooper Kupp. I'm not talking about, the smattering of Torrey Horton that we saw when he was healthy. But yeah, he's actually
Shaheed.
Now that Shaheed's in the building, it's even worse. It's even more spread out, opposite of JSN. But either way, Puka he's already tied his career high in touchdown receptions for the year. He's on pace to shatter his career highs in pretty much every significant statistical category. He's gonna set career highs in targets, in receptions, in touchdowns, in yards per target. Even his rushing stats are the best that he's had in his career, on pace to be the best he's had in his career. Last week, he was the wide receiver 2 in DraftKings scoring. He had his first career. This is weird. First career 2 touchdown receiving game was last week. He's had a multi-score game before, but but one of those was credited as a rushing score. But he's just his first career 2-touchdown receiving game he's coming off of. But again, he's facing that Detroit defense. That Detroit defense sucks. They give up the second most points to wide receivers. It's the highest point total of the week. Like I said, at 55, it should be competitive. The last time I told you to use Puka Nacua was in week 4, and it turned into his second best fantasy day that he's ever had, 36 points. He caught 13 of 15 targets for 175 yards and a score. You could play back against them if you want with Jameson Williams. If that's not necessarily a terrible play, it's one that I have actually plugged into a couple of lineups that I've got here. But we're going to go with Stafford and Nacua. That's our base spirit for this week. At running back, kind of a chalky play here, but you've got to go with Woody Marks at 5,600. Okay, he's only the running back 22 in salary this week. He's a cheap play, but over the last month, he's third in rush attempts behind James Cook and Bijan Robinson. I wrote about Woody Marks here in the Monday morning overreactions article because I think that Woody Marks has potential to be a shoot out the lights type play for the playoffs coming up here. Okay. He's seen targets in the pass game as well. He's been one of the league's highest volume running backs, even with Chubb, even when Chubb was healthy, and now Chubb is hurt, left the game the other day and may not play this week. The guys that Woody Marks' volume is up around are guys like Devin Achane, Christian McCaffrey. We're talking about the guys who are the elite scorers in the league right now. That's the kind of volume Woody Marks is getting right now. He's not as efficient by far as those guys, but the volume is there. He gets the goal line work. He gets the red zone work for that team. He leads them in snaps and touches. He led them in carries in week 14. He led the league in carries in week 14. In fact, this week he grades out right behind Christian McCaffrey for me in terms of the value per dollar this week. He's facing Arizona, who gives up the 4th most points to opposing running backs. And Houston's favored by 9.5 points, which means they should be in run mode for a lot of this game. Let's go Woody Marks, 5,600. We'll play him. And then it's almost obligatory at this point, but we're going to play a tight end against the Cincinnati Bengals, but we're not going to play the one that you might think we're going to play. We're not playing Mark Andrews against the Cincinnati Bengals. We're going to play Isaiah Likely at 3,400 because he's cheaper. And he is actually, over the last 2 weeks, he's the tight end 5 overall in DraftKings scoring, 8th in targets and in receptions over that time period. He's actually he's seen more volume in terms of the pass game and the scoring than Andrews has lately.
Motivated by that Mark Andrews contract.
right. Kind of coincided with, oh, hey, you want to sign him to a long-term extension? Let's see what I can do as a younger dude, right? As a younger, cheaper dude. But no, 2 weeks ago against Cincinnati, he caught 5 of 6 balls for 95 yards. He caught his first touchdown of the year last week, so he's been kind of on a roll. He's a very affordable play in a smash spot. Cincinnati sucks. You play your tight ends against them. It's really that simple. And as I said, he's out-targeted Andrews actually over the last 3 weeks. So we're going to play Isaiah Likely at 3,400. So I'm going to mix up this iced tea here, this Long Beach variation on a Long Beach iced tea that we're calling the one and done. While I mix that up, I'll tell you the ingredients in a minute here, but I'm curious as to know like what you guys are looking at in terms of your DFS lineups. Do you agree? Do you disagree with what we've done here? Do you have any additional plays or guys that you'd like to plug in next to these guys? Dan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, here's what I will say where I agree. It's funny. I also have Puka Nacua in my lineup. Not something I typically do given the high price, but I do have it in this week. And I'm also with you on Isaiah Likely. At $3,400, it's a tight end who plays enough, gets enough target share against that defense that I want to be able to go ahead and take advantage of it. So those are some of the ones that we have the same. Here's one value that apparently DraftKings and nobody else has gotten the memo on. Chuba Hubbard is $4,600. Rico Dowdle is over $6,000. This flipped before the bye week, guys. This already flipped. Chuba Hubbard's back to being the lead guy. Now, this is still going to be a combination of the two, but it's clear it's gone the other way, where Hubbard's now healthy and looking like the better running back, playing like the better running back. He's only $4,600. So that's one of my big values on the week. I also like Jayden Higgins. He's a guy who's been playing more, getting more targets. He's only $4,200 going up against the Arizona Cardinals this week. This is a nice little spot for him to get going, where he's been getting targeted in the red zone quite often over the past few weeks as well. So I'm going that way. And I also have Trevor Lawrence, my quarterback, in there. We talked about him quite a bit today, but he's only $5,700 against the New York Jets. So some of those value plays that I'm looking at, but just to kind of put it out there, I was able to put Puka and JSN in the same lineup, and I'm feeling pretty good about that. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I know. I like a lot of that. I think I'm also big on the Isaiah Likely one. I like that quite a bit. So kudos there. One additional guy that I'm going to throw out at you is Stephon Diggs, who is in the lower end, like the non-favored end of the, I believe, third highest point total over the weekend. And only at $6,000, so kind of being treated as a low end wide receiver 2 type. So I think that's a pretty good value for him personally.
Dan, I love that you brought up Chuba Hubbard, because I actually do have him plugged into my flex spot in my main lineup for the weekend with these guys. Again, like you said, great play, and it's a value that I don't think people are picking up on. I think everybody is still riding the high of what Rico Dowdle was earlier this season without looking at the reality of what Chuba Hubbard has been here the last couple of weeks. So I agree with that completely there. And yeah, we talked about Lawrence. We think Lawrence is a good play too. So yeah, I won't argue with any of those. So our one and done cocktail. What I've done here is I have added a half an ounce of vodka, a half an ounce of gin, a half an ounce of white rum, a half an ounce of tequila, and a half an ounce of Cointreau. I like to do Cointreau instead of triple sec. It punches up the alcohol content a little bit on the drink, which is why we call it a one and done, because you don't want too many of these if you're a lightweight, but I live in Wisconsin. So I've added the vodka, the gin, the white rum, the tequila, the Cointreau, and an ounce of lemon juice. I have shaken that up in my shaker. I've strained that into a tall glass here, my tall fantasy football advice network glass, by the way. And to that, I have topped that off. Instead of topping that off with Coke, I've topped it off with the Christmas winter spiced cranberry Sprite and a splash or two of actual cranberry juice. And that there is our variation of a Long Beach iced tea. We're calling it the one and done. Slanjava, everybody. Good luck on your DFS scoring. Good luck in your playoff games, and enjoy the drink.
Love it, love it, love it. Guys, make sure you tune back into Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app or on the YouTube channel at FF Advice Net, because I'll be back with Dr. Brian Scott tomorrow. You won't want to miss that. And of course, I'll be with Chaz Filardi of Sports Betting Weekly. That show will drop on Saturday mornings like it always does, along with my article on the huddle. And I'm on a hot streak, by the way, with those player props. So make sure you tune into that. Guys, we'll see you soon. Keep it alive. Keep dominating. We'll make it through the round 2.